At my grandson's birthday party. I noticed my name tag said, "The Old ATM." I just smiled, and pinned it to my dress. "I'm glad you're here. Stay with me until the end. And tell me where you're watching from. I'd like to know how far this story reaches." I've always believed that family gatherings were supposed to feel warm, safe, like a place where you belonged without question. That afternoon, the backyard was decorated with bright balloons tied to white wooden chairs. And a long folding table stretched across the lawn, covered in a plastic blue cloth printed with cartoon rockets. My grandson, Tyler, had just turned 8, and I had helped pay for most of what I was looking at, the cake, the decorations, even the catering trays lined up neatly beside the grill. At 68, I don't need much. A quiet home, a good cup of coffee in the morning, a phone call from my son once in a while. But for Tyler, I always made an effort. I wanted his birthday to feel special, even if it meant dipping into my savings again. I had spent extra time getting ready that morning. I chose a soft lavender blouse. My late husband used to say it made my eyes look brighter. I styled my silver hair carefully, just enough to look presentable without trying too hard. Before leaving the house, I paused in front of the mirror for a moment longer than usual. "You still matter," I told my reflection quietly. When I arrived, everything seemed perfect on the surface. Children were running across the yard, their laughter blending with the sound of music playing softly from a speaker near the patio. My son, Daniel, was by the grill, flipping burgers, while my daughter-in-law, Karen, stood near the gift table, greeting guests with a smile that looked polished, practiced. "Mom, you made it," Daniel said when he saw me, giving me a quick hug before turning back to the grill. Karen handed me my name tag at the entrance without much eye contact. "We're doing name tags so everyone can get to know each other," she said lightly. I didn't think much of it at first. It wasn't until I stepped aside and glanced down that I saw it. The Old ATM. For a moment, everything around me seemed to quiet. The laughter, the music, even the breeze that had been gently moving the balloons. I stood there, holding that small piece of paper between my fingers, feeling something shift inside me, not loudly, not dramatically, just enough to know that something wasn't right. But I didn't say anything. I pressed the sticker onto my blouse, smoothed it down carefully, and walked into the party like nothing had happened. I walked further into the backyard, the name tag still pressed neatly against my blouse, as if it belonged there. No one said anything. That was the first thing I noticed. Not a single person looked surprised, not confused, not even mildly uncomfortable. A few glanced at it, quick, subtle looks, then turned away just as fast, like they had already decided it wasn't their place to react. I picked up a paper cup from the drink table and poured myself some lemonade. My hands were steady. That surprised me more than anything. "Looks like a great turnout," I said to Karen as I approached her. She smiled, adjusting the ribbon on one of the gift boxes. "Oh, it is. We invited a lot of Daniel's coworkers this time. Networking, you know." "Networking." I nodded slowly, as if that explained everything. A group of women nearby started laughing, and I caught just enough of their conversation to understand what they were laughing about. "Did you see her tag?" one of them whispered, not quite quietly enough. Karen leaned in slightly, lowering her voice but not enough to hide the tone. "It's just a joke," she said. "She doesn't mind. She's generous." Generous. That word stayed with me. I took a sip of my lemonade. It was too sweet. Across the yard, Tyler was opening his presents, tearing through wrapping paper with excitement. I watched him for a moment, focusing on the sound of his laughter. That was the reason I was here. That had always been the reason. Daniel joined the group near the gift table, laughing at something one of his coworkers said. For a brief second, his eyes met mine. He glanced at my name tag. Then he looked away. Just like that. No pause, no question, no, "Mom, what is that?" Nothing. I felt something settle inside me then. Not anger, not yet, something quieter, heavier. Understanding. I moved to one of the folding chairs and sat down, smoothing my blouse again, my fingers brushing over the words like they might change if I touched them enough. The Old ATM. It wasn't a mistake. It wasn't a misunderstanding. It was how they saw me. And maybe it had been that way for a long time. I just hadn't been looking closely enough to notice. I stayed in that chair longer than I needed to. Long enough to notice the small things. The way people avoided sitting next to me, the way conversations shifted slightly when I got too close, the way my name tag seemed to travel ahead of me before I even spoke. I wasn't invisible. I was labeled. After a while, I stood up and walked back toward the main table. Karen was arranging plates now. Her movements quick, efficient, like she was hosting something much more important than a child's birthday. "Karen," I said gently, keeping my voice even, "I think there might be a mistake on my name tag." She didn't look surprised. She didn't even look up right away. "It's just a little joke," she said, brushing crumbs off the tablecloth. "Everyone's got something fun on theirs." I glanced around. Tyler the Rocket King. Uncle Mike, the grill master. Aunt Susan, the party queen. I nodded slowly. "I see." Karen finally looked at me then, smiling in that same careful way. "Oh, come on, don't take it so seriously. You know how much you help us. We appreciate it." Appreciate. That word again. I studied her face for a moment, searching for something, anything, that looked like embarrassment or regret. There was none. Just comfort. Comfort in saying it out loud. Before I could respond, Daniel walked over, wiping his hands on a paper towel. "Everything okay?" he asked, glancing between us. I turned to him. "This name tag," I said, lightly touching it, "do you think it's appropriate?" He hesitated. Just for a second. Then he gave a small shrug. "It's just Karen's sense of humor. Mom, don't read too much into it. Don't read too much into it." I let the silence stretch for a moment after that. Not long enough to make it awkward. Just long enough for me to feel the weight of his words settle. "I understand," I said. And I did. More than he realized. A child ran past us, nearly knocking into my arm. And the moment broke. Daniel turned back toward the grill. Karen picked up another tray. And just like that, the conversation was over. But something inside me had shifted again. Not painfully. Not loudly. Just clearly. I stepped away from the table and walked toward the gift area, where Tyler's presents were still piled high. I recognized most of them. I had paid for more than a few. The bounce house in the corner? Mine the catering trays? Mine even the custom cake with Tyler's name spelled in blue icing, mine. I stood there, looking at everything I had given. And for the first time, I didn't feel proud. I felt accounted for. Like every dollar had been quietly noted somewhere. Converted into a roll. A title. The Old ATM. I reached up and pressed the edge of the name tag again, making sure it stayed in place. If they wanted me to wear it, I would. For now. I didn't leave the party. Not right away. Instead, I stayed, and I watched. From my seat near the edge of the yard, I began to notice things I had never really paid attention to before. Not because they were hidden, but because I had never thought to look at them this way. Every few minutes, someone would walk up to Karen. "Everything looks amazing," one woman said, holding a plate piled high with food. Karen smiled. "Thank you. It took a lot to put this together." A lot. I followed her gaze for a moment. It didn't land on the decorations, or the food, or even Tyler. It passed over everything and stopped, briefly, on me. Then it moved on. I lowered my eyes to my cup. The lemonade was warm now. A little later, I overheard Daniel speaking with one of his coworkers near the grill. "Yeah, we were able to go all out this year," he said casually. "You know how it is. Family helps out." Family helps out. The man laughed. "Must be nice." Daniel smiled. "It is." I sat there, letting those words settle. Not sharp enough to cut, just steady enough to sink in. I thought back over the past few years. The kitchen remodel they said they couldn't quite afford. The check I wrote that same evening. Tyler's private school tuition, just for one semester, that turned into 3 years. The family vacation to Florida I was invited to, but somehow ended up paying for almost entirely. Each moment had felt reasonable. Understandable. Temporary. I never questioned it. Because that's what mothers do, right? They fill in the gaps. Quietly. without asking for anything back. But sitting there now, with that small piece of paper pressed against my chest, everything began to line up differently. Not as separate moments, but as a pattern. I looked across the yard again. Karen was laughing with a group of guests, her hand resting lightly on Daniel's arm. Tyler was running in circles with his friends, his face bright with joy. Music played softly in the background, something cheerful and forgettable. It looked like a perfect family scene from a distance. But I was sitting close enough to see the details. Close enough to understand what my place in that picture really was. Not at the center. Not even at the edge. Just behind it. Supporting it. Funding it. I reached into my purse and pulled out a small envelope I had brought for Tyler. Inside was a birthday card and a check. I had written it that morning, before I left the house. A generous amount, more than I probably should have. I held the envelope in my hands for a moment, feeling its weight. Then I slipped it back into my purse. Carefully. Quietly. No one noticed. And for the first time in a very long time, I didn't feel guilty about that. Tyler's laughter carried across the yard again, bright and careless, cutting through everything else. I stood up slowly, brushing invisible wrinkles from my blouse, and made my way toward him. He was kneeling on the grass now, surrounded by torn wrapping paper and half-opened boxes, his small hands moving quickly from one gift to the next. "Grandma," he called when he saw me, his face lighting up in a way that felt real, untouched by any of this. I smiled back. "Happy birthday, sweetheart." He threw his arms around me without hesitation. No pause, no second thought. For a moment, I let myself hold onto that. Just that. Not the party. Not the name tag, not the quiet conversations behind my back. Just him. "Did you like the cake?" he asked, pulling back slightly, blue frosting smudged on his fingers. "It's beautiful," I said, "just like you." He grinned and ran off again, already distracted by something new. Children don't hold on to moments the way we do. They move forward easily. I watched him go, and felt something soften inside me. Then I heard a voice behind me. "You're always so good with him." I turned to see Mrs. Carter, an older neighbor I recognized from a few previous gatherings. She held a small plate in her hands, her expression thoughtful as she looked at me. "He adores you," she added quietly. I nodded. "He's a good boy." Her eyes drifted to my name tag. She didn't laugh. Didn't smile. Her lips pressed together slightly. "That's quite a label," she said carefully. I let out a small breath. "It seems to fit, doesn't it?" She tilted her head, studying me. "Only if you let it." That stayed with me. We stood there in silence for a moment, watching the children play. The music shifted to another song. Someone called out for more drinks. The party moved on, as if nothing had happened. But something had. "I've seen this before," Mrs. Carter said after a while, her voice low enough that no one else could hear. "Families get comfortable. Too comfortable. They forget where the line is." I didn't respond right away. Because I knew she was right. "They don't think they're doing anything wrong," she continued. "That's the dangerous part." I glanced toward Karen, who was now laughing with a group near the patio, completely at ease. "No," I said quietly, "they don't." Mrs. Carter looked back at me, her expression soft but steady. "The question is, what are you going to do about it?" I didn't answer her. Not out loud. Instead, I reached up and adjusted my name tag again, pressing it flat against my chest. The old ATM. For the first time since I had read those words, I didn't feel confused by them. I understood them. And more importantly, I understood what needed to change. I didn't answer Mrs. Carter right away. Because the truth was, I already knew. I just hadn't admitted it to myself yet. The party continued around me. Louder now as the afternoon settled in. Music turned up a little higher. More people gathered near the grill. Laughter came in waves, easy, careless, untouched. I walked back toward the drink table and set my empty cup down. Karen noticed me this time. "Oh, good," she said, as if remembering something. "I was just about to ask you, can you help cover the catering balance?" The final invoice came in higher than expected. Just like that. No hesitation, no awkwardness, no acknowledgement of what I was wearing on my chest. I looked at her. Then at Daniel, who had drifted closer, wiping his hands again like he always did when he didn't want to fully step into a conversation. "How much?" I asked. Karen named the number. It wasn't small. It wasn't outrageous either, not for me. Not for what they were used to asking. I nodded slowly, as if considering it. "We already paid most of it." She added quickly, "It's just the extra charges. You know how these things go." Yes. I did know. I had known for years. I reached into my purse, my fingers brushing against the envelope I had tucked away earlier. The check. Still there. Unseen. Unclaimed. "I didn't bring my checkbook today," I said calmly. Karen blinked. "Just once." "Oh," she said, "well, you could transfer it later." Daniel shifted his weight slightly, glancing at me, then away. I met his eyes this time. "I won't be doing that," I said. No edge in my voice. No anger. Just clarity. Silence settled between us, thin but noticeable. Karen let out a small laugh, the kind people use when something doesn't go the way they expect. "Okay," she said lightly, "we can talk about it later." I nodded. "Yes," I said, "we can." But we both knew that wasn't what she meant. And it wasn't what I meant either. A few minutes later, Daniel approached me alone. "Mom," he said quietly, "what's going on?" I looked at him. Really looked this time. At the man I had raised. The boy who used to run to me when he scraped his knee. The teenager who once promised he would always take care of me when I got older. "I was just thinking," I said. "About what?" I touched the edge of my name tag again. "About how things add up," I replied. He frowned slightly. "What does that mean?" "It means," I said, "that sometimes you don't notice the pattern until someone writes it down for you." He followed my gaze to the words on my chest. For a moment, he didn't say anything. Then he exhaled. "Mom, it's just a joke. You're taking this too seriously." There it was. The same sentence. Different tone. Same meaning. I smiled. Not because it was funny, but because it confirmed everything I needed to know. "I'm not upset," I said. And that was the truth. Upset would have meant I was still hoping for something different. I wasn't. I reached into my purse again, feeling the envelope one more time, then closing it. Carefully. Deliberately. "I just won't be helping the way I used to," I added. Daniel stared at me, as if trying to understand what had just changed. But nothing had changed. Not really. I had just stopped ignoring it. Across the yard, Tyler was laughing again. The party carried on. And for the first time in years, I wasn't a part of it. Not the way they expected me to be. Daniel didn't say anything else after that. He just stood there for a moment, like he was waiting for me to take it back. Like I always had. But I didn't. And that seemed to unsettle him more than if I had raised my voice. He nodded once, slowly, then walked away without another word. I watched him go, noticing how quickly he blended back into the crowd, laughing again. Flipping burgers, slipping right back into the version of himself that didn't have to think too hard about anything. That was when I realized something else. It wasn't just Karen. It never had been. A little while later, I saw her again near the dessert table, speaking with two women I didn't recognize. She wasn't lowering her voice this time. "Honestly, it just makes things easier," she said, crossing her arms lightly. "She doesn't really spend on herself. So, it's not like it affects her." One of the women glanced in my direction. Karen didn't. "She actually likes helping," she added with a small laugh. "It gives her something to do." Something to do. I stood still, a few feet away, letting those words reach me without interruption. No anger. No shock. Just confirmation. The conversation shifted as someone brought out more desserts, and the moment passed like it hadn't mattered at all. But it had. I walked over to the gift table again, where the pile had grown smaller. Most of the presents already opened and scattered. The wrapping paper was crumpled. Forgotten, just like the effort behind it. Karen approached me again, her tone different this time, tighter. "So, you're serious?" she asked quietly. I looked at her. Yes. She exhaled through her nose. A small, controlled sound. Okay, I just think it's a little unfair to pull back like this without any warning. Unfair. I repeated that word in my mind. I didn't realize there were terms. I said. Her eyes narrowed slightly. It's not about terms. It's about family. I nodded. Yes, I said, it is. For a second, neither of us spoke. Then she gave a short smile, thin, polite, but no longer warm. Well, she said, we'll figure it out. I believed her. They would figure it out. They always did. That's what happens when you've had someone quietly covering the difference for years. But this time, it wouldn't be me. I turned away before the conversation could go any further and walked toward the edge of the yard again. The sun was starting to dip lower now, casting longer shadows across the grass. Tyler ran past me once more, still laughing, still unaware. And I let him be. Because this wasn't about him. It was about something that had been building for a long time, finally being seen clearly. Behind me, I could feel it shifting. The tone. The energy. The subtle change in how I was being watched. Not as a joke anymore. Not quite. Something closer to concern. Or maybe uncertainty. Good. I reached up and removed the name tag slowly, peeling it off my blouse without rushing. The adhesive resisted for just a second, then gave. I held it in my hand, looking down at the words one last time. The Old ATM. Then I folded it in half. And slipped it into my purse. Not to throw it away. To keep it. Because from that moment on, I wouldn't need anyone to remind me what they thought I was. I didn't leave right away. Even after I folded the name tag and placed it in my purse. I stayed. Not because I still felt welcome. But because I wanted to see what would happen next. The sun had dipped lower, casting a softer light across the yard. The music had quieted. Some guests were beginning to gather their things, offering quick goodbyes, polite smiles. But something had changed. It was subtle. The way Karen kept glancing in my direction, not openly. But often the way Daniel's laughter didn't quite last as long, the way conversations lowered slightly when I walked past. They felt it. Not what I had said. But what I had stopped doing. I moved back toward the main table, where a few plates were left untouched. The catering trays, half full now, sat quietly under the warm afternoon air. Karen approached again, slower this time. We're thinking of doing something for the holidays, she said, her tone carefully neutral. Maybe hosting Thanksgiving this year. I looked at her. That sounds nice, I replied. She nodded. Yeah, it'll be a bit bigger than this. More people, more planning. I waited. She hesitated. Then added, we'll probably need to budget carefully this time. Budget. Another word that hadn't been used around me in a very long time. I'm sure you will, I said. She studied my face, as if searching for something, an opening, a signal, a version of me she recognized. She didn't find it. Daniel joined us again, quieter now. Mom, he said, you're still coming for Thanksgiving, right? I met his eyes. Of course, I said, if I'm invited. He frowned slightly. You're always invited. I gave a small nod. I just wanted to hear you say it. That seemed to land differently than he expected. Because for the first time, it wasn't about what I could bring. It was about whether I belonged. Karen shifted beside him, crossing her arms lightly. We'll figure out the details later, she said. I nodded again. Yes, I said, you will. A few minutes later, I walked over to Tyler one last time. He was sitting on the grass now, tired but happy, holding one of his new toys. Did you have a good birthday? I asked. He looked up at me and smiled. The best one. I reached into my purse. For a second, my fingers touched the envelope again. Then I moved past it, and pulled out something else. A small, simple gift I had brought as a backup. Something thoughtful, something just for him. I handed it to him. This one's from me, I said. He opened it immediately, his face lighting up again. And that was enough. I didn't need the check. I didn't need the gesture to be seen. I just needed to know. I had chosen it. As I stood up, I glanced once more around the yard. The decorations. The food. The people. All of it still there. But something fundamental had shifted. Not in them. In me. I picked up my purse, resting it lightly over my shoulder. And for the first time in years, I walked out of a family gathering without leaving anything behind. I didn't rush out of the driveway. I sat in my car for a moment, hands resting on the steering wheel, watching the house in the rearview mirror. From the outside, it still looked the same. Balloons tied to the fence, cars lined up along the curb, laughter drifting faintly through the open windows. A perfect family afternoon. I started the engine, but I didn't pull away just yet. Instead, I reached into my purse. The folded name tag was still there. I took it out slowly and unfolded it, smoothing the crease with my thumb. The old ATM. The words didn't sting anymore. They felt accurate. Not because that's who I was, but because that's who I had allowed myself to become. I placed the tag back into my purse, this time in a different pocket. Not hidden, not forgotten. Kept. As a reminder. Then I drove home. The house was quiet when I stepped inside. Too quiet, at first. But then something settled. Not loneliness. Not emptiness. Just space. I placed my purse on the kitchen counter and slipped off my shoes. The familiar rhythm of the house wrapped around me, soft, steady, mine. No noise, no expectations, no one asking for anything. I walked over to the cabinet and took out a glass, filling it with water. The sound of it pouring echoed lightly through the kitchen. Simple. Controlled. I took a sip and leaned against the counter, letting the day replay in my mind. Not the laughter. Not the decorations. Just the moments that mattered. Karen's voice, Daniel's silence, that word, unfair. And the look on their faces when I said no. I set the glass down. Then I reached for my phone. For a second, I just held it there. Because I knew, this was the part where things usually went back to normal. A call, a message, a quiet apology, from me. That's how it had always worked. But this time, I didn't dial Daniel. I opened a different contact. Margaret, attorney. My thumb hovered for a moment. Then I pressed call. She picked up on the third ring. "Well, this is a surprise," she said warmly. "It's been a while." "It has," I replied. A pause. Then she asked, gently, "Everything all right?" I looked around my kitchen. At the stillness. At the life I had built, and slowly handed away piece by piece. "Yes," I said. Then, after a beat, "I think it's about to be." Another pause. I could almost hear her shift into focus on the other end. "What can I help you with?" I didn't hesitate this time. "I'd like to review everything," I said. "My accounts, my will, any access anyone else might have." The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was attentive. "All right," Margaret said, "we can do that." I nodded, even though she couldn't see me. "And I don't want to make a scene," I added. "I just want things to be clear." "Clear is good," she replied. I ended the call a few minutes later and set the phone down gently on the counter. No anger. No urgency. Just a decision, finally put into motion. Outside, the sun had nearly set. The light coming through the window was softer now. Quieter. I stood there for a moment longer, then turned off the kitchen light. And for the first time in a very long time, I wasn't reacting anymore. I was preparing. The next morning, I didn't change my routine. I woke up at 6:30. Just like always, made my coffee, stood by the kitchen window while the sun came up slowly over the quiet street. The world looked the same. But I didn't feel the same inside it. There was no rush, no heaviness, no replaying the party in my head. Just clarity. I took my time getting dressed. Nothing special. A simple beige sweater, dark slacks, comfortable shoes. The kind of outfit you wear when you know exactly where you're going, and why. By 9:15, I was in my car. Margaret's office was about 20 minutes away, in a small brick building near downtown. I had been there once before. Years ago, when my husband was still alive. Back then, everything had felt shared. This time, it was different. I walked in, signed my name at the front desk, and took a seat near the window. The waiting room was quiet, filled with the soft hum of a coffee machine and the occasional turning of pages from a magazine someone had left behind. Margaret came out to greet me herself. She hadn't changed much. Same calm eyes, same steady presence. "It's good to see you," she said, offering a warm but measured smile. "You too," I replied. We sat across from each other in her office, a thick folder already waiting on the desk between us. "Why don't we start with what you have in mind?" she said. I folded my hands neatly in my lap. "I want to understand exactly what belongs to me," I said, "and who has access to it." She nodded once, like she had expected that answer. We went through everything. Accounts, property, investment records, old documents I hadn't looked at in years. She explained each piece clearly. Without rushing, I listened. Really listened. At one point, she paused and looked up at me. "Did something happen?" she asked gently. I thought about the party. The name tag. Karen's voice. Daniel's silence. Then I shook my head slightly. "Nothing new," I said, "I just finally paid attention." She didn't push further. Instead, she turned a document toward me. "This," she said, tapping lightly on the page, "is your current will. It hasn't been updated since your husband passed." I looked down at it. Names, percentages, assumptions. Everything written as if nothing would ever change. "Can it be adjusted?" I asked. Margaret met my eyes. "Of course." I nodded slowly. "I'd like to make some changes." No hesitation. No emotion behind it. Just a decision. We spent the next hour going over options. Trust structures, access limitations, conditions. Nothing dramatic. Nothing complicated. Just precise. Before I left, Margaret handed me a copy of everything we discussed. "Take your time reviewing this," she said. "We can finalize whenever you're ready." I stood up, holding the folder in my hands. "I won't need much time," I replied. Because I already knew. This wasn't about reacting to what happened yesterday. It was about correcting something that had been allowed to continue for far too long. As I walked out of the office, the air felt cooler, sharper. I took a deep breath and stepped into the sunlight. And for the first time, I wasn't wondering what they would say next. I was deciding what they would hear. I didn't tell anyone about the meeting. Not Daniel, not Karen. Not yet. The next few days passed quietly. The kind of quiet that used to feel empty, but now felt intentional. On Wednesday afternoon, my phone rang. "Daniel." I let it ring once, twice, then answered. "Hi, Mom." His voice sounded normal, careful, but normal, like he was testing the ground before stepping forward. "Hi," I said. A short pause. "We were thinking about Sunday." He continued, "Just a small dinner. Nothing big. Karen wants to plan ahead for Thanksgiving. Maybe go over some things." Go over some things. I leaned back slightly in my chair, looking out the window. "That sounds fine," I said. Another pause. "You'll come?" I said I would, didn't I? He exhaled quietly. "Yeah, you did." There was something else he wanted to say. I could hear it sitting there, waiting. But he didn't say it. "All right," he added, "we'll see you Sunday." "We will," I replied. When the call ended, I didn't move right away. I just sat there, holding the phone in my hand for a moment longer than necessary. Then I set it down. Sunday came without much effort. I dressed the same way I always did for family dinners. Simple, neutral, nothing that asked for attention. But this time, I brought something with me. Not food. Not a gift. A folder. I placed it neatly in my purse before leaving the house. When I arrived, the house felt different. Quieter than the party, more contained. Karen opened the door. "Hi," she said, her smile polite but measured. "Hello," I replied. Daniel appeared behind her, stepping forward to give me a quick hug. It felt brief, uncertain. Dinner was already set. Plates arranged neatly, silverware aligned, everything in its place. I took my seat. No name tags this time. Just silence, stretching a little too long between sentences. "So," Karen began, picking up her glass, "we thought it might be a good idea to talk about the holidays early this year. Planning, Budgets. Expectations? Budgets. There it was again. Daniel nodded. Yeah, just making sure everyone's on the same page. I folded my hands lightly on the table. I agree, I said. They both looked at me. Maybe they expected hesitation. Maybe they expected negotiation. Instead, I reached into my purse. Slowly. Calmly. And placed the folder on the table in front of me. Neither of them touched it. Not yet. I've already started reviewing everything. I continued. My accounts. My will. All of it. Karen's expression shifted slightly. Daniel leaned forward just a bit. What do you mean? He asked. I met his eyes. It means, I said, that from now on, everything will be handled differently. No raised voice. No anger. Just a sentence, placed exactly where it needed to be. The room went quiet. And for the first time, they weren't the ones deciding how this conversation would go. No one reached for the folder right away. Karen's hand rested near her glass. Still, Daniel looked at me, then at the papers, then back at me again. Like he was trying to understand when the shift had really happened. Not that night. Not at the party. Much earlier. They just hadn't seen it. I'm not here to argue, I said calmly, and I'm not here to explain every detail. My voice didn't rise. It didn't need to. I just want things to be clear. Daniel swallowed slightly. Mom, we didn't mean. I lifted my hand gently. Not to stop him. Just to pause him. I know, I said. And I did. That was the hardest part to admit. They didn't plan it like a betrayal. They just got used to it. Got used to me saying yes. Got used to me filling in every gap. Got used to not asking. Karen finally leaned forward, her fingers brushing the edge of the folder. What is this? She asked. Quieter now. Boundaries, I replied. One word. Simple. But it landed. Daniel opened the folder this time. Slowly, carefully, like it might change depending on how he handled it. He scanned the first page. Then the next. I watched his expression shift, not dramatically. Not all at once, but enough. Less certainty. More awareness. Karen leaned in beside him, her eyes moving quickly across the lines. Access changes, account controls, conditions. Nothing emotional. Just structure. I'm not taking anything away, I said. I'm just deciding where it goes, and how. Daniel looked up at me. This is because of the party? He asked. I held his gaze. No, I said. It's because I finally listened. Silence filled the room again. But this time, it wasn't uncomfortable. It was honest. Karen sat back slowly, her arms no longer crossed. Daniel closed the folder, his hand resting on top of it. For a moment, none of us spoke. Then I reached for my purse. I'll still be here, I said, for dinner, for holidays, for Tyler. I paused. But not like before. No one argued. No one laughed. No one called it a joke. Because now, it wasn't one. Later that evening, I stood at the door, ready to leave. Tyler ran up to me again, wrapping his arms around my waist. Are you coming back soon? He asked. I smiled, resting my hand gently on his shoulder. Of course, I said. And I meant it. Because this wasn't about leaving. It was about staying differently. Daniel walked me to the door. Mom, he said quietly, I didn't realize. I looked at him. I know, I said. And this time, when I smiled, it wasn't to hide anything. It was because I finally didn't have to. That night, back in my own home, I took the name tag out of my purse one last time. The old ATM. I looked at it for a moment. Then I placed it in a drawer. Not as something painful. Not as something to forget. But as something that had done its job. It had shown me, clearly, where I stood. And more importantly, where I would never stand again. I closed the drawer gently, turned off the light, and walked away, without looking back.